In 1995, Paul W.S. Anderson directed Mortal Kombat, which was based on the popular video game series with the same name. This movie was okay. It honestly was kind of faithful to the games, outside of one thing. The movie was PG-13, and the games are M-rated for a reason. They're fucking gory.
Fatality. Rain wins.
But besides that, the adaptation was a good effort. Paul's next movie was Event Horizon, which was another movie I enjoyed, and that was not based on a game, so it has a small fan base. Then everything would change after directing Alien vs. Predator, which was made in 2004. This was his last good movie. Yes, that does imply I liked the first Resident Evil movie, since that was made in 2002. And it's a good movie. Again, it wasn't until the Death Race remake from 2008 came out when it seemed like he truly just didn't care about directing anymore. Anyway, I don't want to go into too much detail about Resident Evil 2002 because I do plan on making a video on it at some point. I just really needed to give my opinion on Paul W.S. Anderson and his video game movies. Resident Evil is a good movie that I honestly could see just being a spin-off to the game series, since it makes no real references to any of the characters of the games. Umbrella is really the only thing connecting this to the games. I mean, besides the creatures. It was a fun little horror movie that had likable characters that were written realistically. And Alice actually has a character in this movie, mostly because Paul wasn't married to her yet. He met her while making this movie. Now, the sequels tried way too hard to stay far away from the games, but also having characters who look and share the same names as the original game characters. Now, they look and have the same names, as I said, but they don't share the same personalities, and they honestly could have easily had their names changed, and no one would have noticed. Also, Alice becomes a Mary Sue demigod-like character who is always overshadowing the game characters and is wearing something super sexy or just naked. I mean, I get it, Paul. You have this amazing and super hot wife, and you just want the world to see her as this sexy badass. But why did you have to ruin Resident Evil? Also, the movies were set in a post-apocalyptic world, where the government is just gone, and it's a Mad Max-like dystopian. The games wasn't set in the post-apocalypse, and the government was still fine. Life continued normally, with the once-in-a-while bioterrorist attacks. Now, that being said, the sequels are still guilty pleasures of mine. I do love the mindless action scenes, plus I can easily shut my brain off when watching this trash. But I talked way too much on the Paul Anderson's Resident Evil movies. Resident Evil for the Sony PlayStation was honestly what kicked off the survival horror genre. Even though Alone in the Dark was first, it also wasn't that well known in the public eye. So Resident Evil really is the reason why we have games like Silent Hill, Dead Space, Outlast, and of course, Luigi's Mansion. That last game really gives me nightmares. Now, I love the original Resident Evil, but it's honestly outdated. Plus, there isn't really a real reason to play it since the remake is almost 100% the same game, with only changing small things and adding new things like Lisa Trevor and Crimson Heads. Welcome to Raccoon City takes inspiration more from the remakes than the original, and I love both remakes. Now, I don't want to talk too much about the games because I do at least want to make videos on them as well. So since I think the original Resident Evil is outdated, you probably are thinking that I think Resident Evil 2 is outdated as well. And no, I don't. I don't think the original Resident Evil 2 is outdated because the remake is not a one-to-one remake. It makes a lot of changes and leaves a lot of things that made the original Resident Evil 2 great out. Now, I love both of the Resident Evil 2 games, and I highly recommend them both, but I highly recommend both Resident Evil 2 because you'll be getting two different experiences with the two games. And I wish they added a lot of things that was missing in the remake from the original, because it would have been so great. But it didn't. And the remake just isn't one-to-one. So I don't think it's outdated. I don't think the original is outdated. The original Resident Evil, I think, is outdated because of the remake, which is one-to-one. So you now know I'm a big fan of this series, and I just hated how the Alice movies treated the source material. By the way, I don't call the original live-action Resident Evil movies Resident Evil. I call them the Alice movies. Anyway, the Alice movies never really tried to be anything close to the games, or at least after Apocalypse, they stopped trying. So hopefully this movie starts something beautiful. Now, I wrote this whole intro days before I went to see it, so let's go to the theaters. Oh God, I hate the outside world. So when the trailer launched, a lot of fans were kind of not sure what to think, especially when What's Up by Four Non-Blondes plays.
25 years and my life is still
We have to contain this.
trying to get up that great big hill of hope.
The first time watching it, I rolled my eyes and was just thinking about that He-Man meme.
And so I cry sometimes when I'm lying in bed just to get it all out what's in my head.
Now, after watching the trailer multiple times, it grew on me, and seeing every promotional material, I was becoming more and more excited for it. So I hope it was good, or at least fun to make fun of, like the Alice movies. So was this movie worth a watch, or did it deserve to stay dead and buried? Now, I love how the virus affects people. It really shows the effects. It shows them slowly going mad until they turn into a complete zombie. Now, the movie only has zombies, one Cerberus, aka the dogs, and one liquor. And also the final monster, of course. That kind of sucks. But Sherry, when talking to her father about a nightmare she had, she describes a hunter from Resident Evil 1. Also, they make jokes about giant snakes and giant sharks. I thought that was kind of cute. Again, it's really obvious they don't have the money for other monsters and the time, since they needed this to flow nicely. In the games, Chris and Claire are orphans. They don't really explain what happened to the parents, or at least they don't explain who takes care of them. They do explain what happens to the parents. I think they get in a car crash or something like that. But they don't explain who watches them. And in this movie, they're living in the Raccoon City orphanage, which is owned by Umbrella in this movie, not in the games. It honestly seems like they switched the roles of Claire and Jill. Let me explain. Like in RE3, Jill was this hard-ass conspiracy person trying to reveal what Umbrella has been doing. In the movie, it's Claire because of what happened to her in the orphanage. Jill is a sweet, caring person who can take care of business when she needs to in the movie. So just like how she was in Resident Evil 1, and like how Claire was in Resident Evil 2. It seemed like their personalities kind of swapped just so it could fit the story, and I didn't hate it. Now, Chris has no real changes. This is the Chris from the games. Robbie Amell? really captured the personality of the original character. I hope I pronounced that right. Now let's talk about Leon S. Kennedy. In this movie, he is a rookie who was transferred to Raccoon City after shooting his partner in the ass during training. He's treated as the desk receptionist in the movie. Well, treated, he is the desk receptionist. Actually, all of the characters, except like a couple, give him shit. And it doesn't really have that much screen time. It seems to be way more focused on the Redfields. Leon doesn't 100% act like his original character, but I do see it. It kind of seems like a mix of Leon from Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil 2 Remake. I mean, it's better than that weird pervert in the Alice movies. I do like this Leon. And Avon Joga, I think that's how you pronounce his name, does a great job on what he is given. And I always thought he was perfect for this role. I've seen him in other movies, and I was like, this is Leon. This is Leon. And I was right. So it might be time to focus on spoilers, so skip here to see my final thoughts. Now, this really isn't a spoiler for the movie, but it is for the games. Sheriff Irons in the game was a crooked cop who knew every little secret Umbrella was hiding. He also was in love with a dead woman that is lying on his desk. Fucking weirdo. In the movie, Irons does know what Umbrella is doing, but they don't really make him seem like a crooked cop. He's a lot more like a stereotype of an angry chief detective in those cop movies. I do like this version, but they really don't honestly explain how he knew Umbrella was going to destroy the city and about the secret laboratory in the orphanage. It kind of feels like you need to have played the games just to fully see what is going on. So newcomers might be confused, but they also might not, since I know who Irons is and I wasn't confused. Now, let's go to one of the monsters that is a big role in this movie. Lisa Trevor, who first appeared in the Resident Evil remake. In the game, she was a little girl who was a guinea pig for Umbrella's tests. So was her parents as well. She wore the face of her mother, which she stole from a person who she didn't really believe was her mother. So now she just walks the mansion's grounds looking for her mother, attacking anyone that gets in her way. She's a child who just doesn't understand what is going on and just thinks everyone is going to hurt her like Umbrella did. In the movie, she was an orphan who was tested on and it mutated her. She befriends Claire when she was a child and helps her and Leon find their way to the underground laboratory. They don't really talk about her mother. Honestly, they don't really explain what the face she is wearing actually is. I don't think it's human skin because it never rotted all these years. Again, her face mask was fresh when she was a kid and it still looks as fresh as an adult. So I don't think it's a face of her mother. She really likes dolls, so it's probably just a doll's face. Okay, I don't hate this change because Lisa Trevor wasn't really a monster. She was just confused, or at least that's what I seen her as in the game. So her and Claire becoming friends is a good change. It's kind of the start of her becoming suspicious of Umbrella. William Birkins is seen as a normal doctor throughout the movie. Actually, he's creepy from the start. He doesn't hide he is the bad guy of the movie. Now, Birkins in the games was only seen once in his human form before giving himself the G virus. So I honestly can't really compare the versions. He's just evil in this movie. Now, his wife and daughter get no real screen time. Actually, his wife isn't even a scientist. And she didn't even know anything about what her husband was doing. Sherry, again, only shows up for a few minutes and isn't really a character at all. She honestly could have easily written her out. And I mean nothing would have changed. She adds nothing to the story unlike in the game, and it's Jill and Chris who save her from Wesker. Ooh, let's talk about Albert Wesker. He actually has way more of a character than his game version. They really do make you like him, and he really isn't that evil. He goes to the mansion to leave his crew to die so he can take the G-Virus and sell it to this unknown company. Actually, it seems like he takes the place of Ada and Nikolai from Resident Evil 3. He doesn't hate stars, he just wants the money. He also doesn't work for Umbrella, like at all. This character has the most changes, and again, I'm fine with this. Yeah, he's still a bad guy, but they didn't write him as the obvious bad guy. Plus, I loved the relationship between him and Jill. It was cute. It's pretty clear the characters who get the main focus are the Redfields, Wesker, and Lisa. I understand why they had to either not put characters in like Barry or Rebecca. One day, Rebecca, you will be in a live-action movie. One day. And also have another characters be put on the side, since they are trying to combine two games into one movie. Would I have wished they focused on one game? Yes, but for what they did, it works fine. It flowed together nicely. I had fun watching the movie, loved seeing the little Easter eggs in the background, plus there's a little hint to Code Veronica. I hope they adapt that into the sequel. So I overall loved this movie. I thought it was fun, and I would love to see this live-action Resident Evil series continue. And it was just great. And it was way better than what Paul W.S. Anderson wrote/directed. This was so much more faithful than the Alice movies. I'm honestly glad he had no involvement with this. Wait, he was the producer? What?